Yeah.
But this is what really offends me. This is today. Okay. You say, well, that's when he was senator, that's when he was vice president. But here he is today as president during his town hall. And he said this about racial disparity about the vaccines. He said, not everybody in the community, in the Hispanic and African American community, particularly in rural areas that are distant and or inner city districts, know how to get online to determine how to get in line for that COVID vaccination. They don't know how to use online systems because they are African American or Hispanic. Where's the outrage against these comments? And is that racism or is that stereotype? So
Mm,
this is, go ahead. Go ahead.
I would say that's a little bit of both, and
Yeah.
just a bad and a bad, because that would exclude every Caucasian. That means every Caucasian knows how to get online and get into the system and all of that. And being, I've worked in tech support, is people of all nationalities get confused on a computer, especially senior citizens, people who are just coming into technology, and that's every nationality. And so that was very. I would be offended, definitely, to have heard that. So just because, again, of my skin color, just because of where I live, just because I'm inner city, I'm not qualified enough to be in the upper echelon of your conversation.
Over and over again. Like
Yeah.
over and over again. But this is my thing. President Biden, how old is he? I honestly don't know his exact age. But it reminds me when I was younger, I was in my early 20s and I worked in a nursing facility and retirement community. And this was back in the 1990s, early 1990s. And the the residents there were in their 80s and 90s themselves, okay? So think about that. They were used to black people being servants. That's who they were. When they would saw me come in, they're like, "Oh, we got a in-house maid," because I was light skinned. And a particular gentleman would call the darker skinned black people, "Oh, you're an outhouse maid."
Oh,
And that's just the way that's what he grew up with. That's what he knew. It wasn't offensive to us because if we looked from his eyes, that's what he knew. That's what he understand. I had couples come in and say, "Oh, how's my favorite N?" and would use the word because that's what I was to them. And I had to realize, wait a minute, they're in their 80s, they're in their 90s. This was their culture. They've never really been around anybody. And I would sit down. I had conversations with some of them and said, "Why do you still use that word?" And they're like, "What else word would I use? That's just a word to define you. That's what I know you as." So I began to educate them. Use my name. Let's just use my name. Don't identify me. Just use my name. But Biden, I don't know if he's racist or he just that's the way he thinks. He well, I guess it's racist because he really puts down every other race but white. But I think
but
why
him
do
being
we put up with
white,
that?
is that what he was? Is that what he is accustomed to?
Yes.
As a politician, should he be required to conform to what's happening now, not what you grew up in? Or and that will be acceptable for us who sit in the background. But no, not even us, because we're leaders and we're required to conform to what's happening now. I can't continue to, even like if you took on a role of a pastor, I wouldn't still keep calling you Melanie. I would now call you Pastor Melanie. If you became an apostle, I would say Apostle Melanie. I wouldn't still call you, even with the president. Even when you don't like who the president is, we say what? Respect their
President.
title and call them
Yes.
president. whoever. So, and to me, he should have to conform to what's happening right now. Somebody surely has had to tell him, you can't keep pointing out inner city and black. When he said, if you don't already decide to that I'm better than Trump, then
Right.
you must not be black. To me, that said you already had decided the black vote was yours,
Mhm.
hands down. That's basically what that said to me.
There's a whole lot to unpack for that comment, because why does he think that all blacks have to vote for him? Like, what is that about? Why blacks don't have a mind to think and process what they want? They just automatically vote Democratic Party because that's what they're told. So
Right.
again, it's a negative on what he thinks about the black culture, that they don't think for themselves, that they just do as they did before. And anyone who broke ranks for that isn't black. That's just offensive, you
Yeah.
know. Um, I remember my husband and I, when we were younger, everything happened when we were younger, but it still happens to him today. Being called an Uncle Tom when we don't do according to the black culture, or like Biden said, don't vote for Biden. You know, we're Uncle Toms. We've crossed over. We're no longer black. You know, why is that? When we bought our first house, we were young. We bought our first house. It was 2-story. It was a beautiful house, picket fence, everything. It was just nice. We were called Uncle Tom for having it. Why you sell out? Why you getting a house like the white people? What? We just got a house.
Right.
We're gonna raise children. We just got a house. Why didn't you get a house in the black neighborhood? Why did you get a house in a mixed neighborhood? How many black people are in that neighborhood? I don't know. I didn't do a study on it, but that's what's happening is, you know, it's stereotypes. We're supposed to fit into our certain stereotype, but you can't say it. You can't acknowledge that it's a stereotype. Here's the difference between stereotype and racism. And I found this article. I'll put where I found it up right here. Um, it's a really good site, to know the differences of one thing or another, so you don't get it confused. But he said basically, to start off, racism is illegal, stereotype is not. All right, but then he goes off to say, and this affects Dr. Seuss and probably President Biden. I don't know how old he is. But until the 1930s, there was no such thing as racism. It didn't exist because they didn't have a word for it. It was the culture, it was the norm. And
Yeah.
only as things started to progress in society did people say, oh, wait a minute, you're still holding black people to that level. Now you're a racist. You're still seeing people as different. Now that's racism. So it wasn't even really formed when Dr. Seuss was writing these books or doing these political. It was just the norm, as what this author says. But he goes on to say this: racism, when practiced, affects a society in a negative way. All right, it's the institutional racism refers to the benefits, rights, and preferential treatment of a certain race or the denial of the same for another race. So racism is when one race has preferential treatment, it has rights, it has authority over another race. Okay, that's racism. When you believe that, when you act on it, and it changes society. Stereotype refers to a belief that you have about people, certain types of people, or their belief or social group. It's the impression in the mind of a person or a group of people about another person or a group of people. So if I'm just thinking, if you say Asian and you get a picture of what you think Asian is, that's stereotype. If you say Asian and I think, wow, whites are better than Asians, that's racism.
Right. That is correct.
Okay? But I think we're so muddied, Brandy. It's so muddied that we don't know what we're doing. And I love what you said about colorism and prejudice being included in the conversation, because it's not all racism. And we can't just listen. I don't agree with anything of those quotes President Biden said
Right.
when he was a senator, when he was a vice president or a president. It's obviously ingrained in him because it's followed him throughout the years. And that's just 5 examples. I'm going to tell you what, there's numerous amounts of examples. So it's just the way he believes. It's the way he thinks. It's what he knows as his truth. But like you said, he's president. He should conform some of those truths. Keep them to himself. And because how can you represent all of America
Right.
if you have these biases inside of you? You really can't.
Not, uh, because they used to tell me there's certain stuff you can say at home, and there's certain stuff that you can say once we walk out of these doors. Do you understand that? Yes, I understand. You don't talk about what we talked about in the house at church. There was just you talk about how you really feel about somebody behind closed doors. But when you come out in the public, there's all kind of stuff I want to say. That's my personal opinion, but that's not who I want represented for my company, for my people, for anybody that's working with me. I don't want you to assume, anything about me because of one statement. Because you make one wrong statement these days, off with your head. Culture. So I make sure that even like when we're on the line, we make sure that we don't say too much, but make sure that our opinion is heard, but we still protect people's feelings. I don't see that going on with the president. I don't see him trying to, not in these statements, trying to protect all the people, all involved. It's just like the black people should be for me. Uh, that was taught. I think back in the day, middle class, lower class, and black people, no matter which class you fell in, was democratic. I don't
Right.
think still the case. I think people have come into choosing because they want to choose. But yes, I do believe that was taught. But for him to say it like that makes me believe that he still believes that way. Like, so if you're black, I get the black dollar, I get the black vote.
Yes. And the thing is, he hasn't grown with time. He hasn't educated himself enough to understand that things are not the same as when it was back then. Now, if a new author came out with books like Dr. Seuss, okay, it would be put in question immediately,
Immediately.
because it's like, wait a minute, we don't do that now. Yes, it was done then, but we don't do that now. Um, so let me ask you this. Will you still read Dr. Seuss, or is he banned from your house?
Well, I'm like you. I don't have any little people, but if I did, I'm actually going to go find some books because now I have to look at it with a different eye. And then maybe once I can see, all I remember is red fish, blue fish, green fish, two fish. I don't remember seeing anything that would remotely be racist. But so now I'm going to go back and look and see if, I mean, I have nieces and nephews, and I'm sure they have Dr. Seuss books and stuff like that. And if not, I'm going to go find some just so I can really, and then can we do a part two once I
Yes.
can actually look at it and see, okay, I can understand how that would come across as racist. But here's my ending thought. If we're canceling Dr. Seuss, why aren't we canceling Walt Disney?
Oh, okay. Part two will be Dr. Seuss and Walt Disney. How's that? I've got too much on Walt Disney in my brain and my thought process. I'm one of the very few people who did not allow her children to have Walt Disney in our home. We,
Remember that.
we remember that he was not allowed in my home, and people thought, "What's wrong with you?" So we'll do a show on that. The reason I asked, what is
Praise.
what?
Walt Disney is praised. He could do no wrong.
Nothing else.
Now that look, now that you gave me I remember you gave me the revelation. So yes, on our part two, we're gonna talk. I'm gonna give you the actual things that I could find once I looked at it with the new lens on Dr. Seuss, and then we'll talk about Old Faithful Walt Disney.
Walt Disney. This is the thing, and I like what you said, a new lens. The problem that I have is we're picking on things in the past and we're bringing today's understanding to them. And
Hmm.
so I did go and look at Dr. Seuss books after I saw this information. And it did color my eyes. It did make me see a new lens. And even now, since I had the revelation while we were talking about the cat being black, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I don't know that I like that book anymore. It does skew you. Just like with President Biden. If you didn't catch his speeches and you didn't know he said these quotes, because over the course of his lifetime, he's had a lot of great things to say. He has done service to America. He has been a great patron, right? Patriot. But then if now I just gave you a picture of him that I wanted you to see for this show, this purpose. Does it
Hmm.
skew who you see him as? I think we're in a dangerous place when we look in the past, when we apply today's values and blueprints of society. I'm not talking about moral values, I'm talking about societal values. And
Hmm.
we apply it in a microscopic way, nothing is going to be good anymore. Nothing's going to be valid. Everyone's going to have to be canceled because nothing can live up to that scrutiny. I think we're dangerous. I think we're in dangerous places here. I think we're about to cancel everybody out because of what one part of them, when 99% of them are good, decent people and they're doing a good thing. For me, Dr. Seuss did a good thing. He wrote about his times. He wrote his book on his experiences, and myself and my children, and probably my grandchildren, if they allow it, will love Dr. Seuss because I'm going to tell you what, you learn a lot from it. Like one of the authors said, he taught values. He taught to respect people, to be friendly, to share. He taught these things in those books. But I don't know what's going to stand through the scrutiny of this society. I have no idea.